Tonight on Reporting Scotland, a teenager who broke her neck in 2 places after she was knocked down in a hit and run feared she could be paralysed.
I can remember getting up, sitting on a crate in the ambulance and the police and that came, and I can remember going to the hospital, but I don't remember when it actually hit me.
Also coming up in the programme, life expectancy falls for the first time since current records began. The question is, why? Campaigners claim hundreds of autistic children have been unlawfully excluded from school in the past 2 years.
Hi, I'm Paul McNeill, and football saved my life.
It's not just a sport. The impact camaraderie and community can have on mental health. And a revised plan for a £22 million revamp of the Scottish National Gallery. Good evening. A man has been sentenced to 11 years in prison for the attempted murder of 6 children in a hit and run. Gerald Gavan had been targeting a man when he knocked down the children in Glasgow in March. A girl who was 14 at the time had her neck broken in 2 places. Her family was told she may never walk again. She's been talking exclusively to Katrina Renton.
It was just as we were about to leave, a car had come up that hill and kind of just crashed into us at the green electricity boxes.
On Saturday the 24th of March, Roisin was outside the shops with a group of her friends, aged 12 to 14, when a car drove into them.
I can remember getting up, sitting on a crate in the ambulance and the police and that came, and I can remember going to the hospital, but I don't remember when it actually hit me.
The driver, 22-year-old Gerald Gavan, had been targeting a man with whom he was involved in a family feud called Billy McGregor, but he ploughed into the children. Roisin pushed some of her friends out of the way of the car. Then she was reversed over. The car drove off. Roisin's neck was broken in 2 places. Doctors warned her mother she could be paralysed or even die on the operating table.
She had 2 bad breaks in her neck, which I totally didn't understand because she was lying speaking, so I was kind of confused at the time because I had no idea what a broken neck meant, really. But it was the worst experience ever. It was mainly thought, would she be able to walk or function for the neck down kind of thing. I didn't know what was going on with the rest of her body or her arms and legs. We didn't know what was going to happen with them, so it was a horrible time.
Roisin's mother and sister have seen the CCTV of what happened. Yeah,
it wasn't nice to watch. You always have a kind of idea when somebody tells you what something happens, you form a wee picture in your mind, but I never ever thought it would have been like that. It was really, really graphic.
It's a horrible thing that they've done, but I just hope they do realise what they've done and how they have impacted families who were really nothing to do with the whole situation.
Remarkably, Roisin was on her feet again 8 days later. It's hoped now she's made a full recovery.
I didn't think I was going to recover as fast as I did, obviously because of how bad the breaks were. I thought it had been quite a lot longer than what it actually was.
I wasn't expecting it to be quite as quick as it was, but I wasn't surprised because she was just determined she was getting up and going, and that was it. So there was no stopping her once she decided she wanted out of that bed. She was just going for it.
Roisin lives just a few minutes from where the crash happened.
The first time I was back at the shops, it was weird because I was under everything that happened there, but because I go there for lunch in school, I just kind of need to get used to it.
So you've got on with it?
Yeah.
She's back to normal, definitely. But our messy room doesn't bother me as much anymore. And her wee smart comments, I find them amazing now. I'm I like her with the wee comments that she makes and stuff. Whereas before I might have shouted at her or something. But no, I kind of appreciate the fact that she's still here being cheeky and what have you.
That report from Katrina Renton. The Scottish Labour leader, Richard Leonard, has told BBC Scotland he would probably vote Remain if there's another referendum on EU membership. He was speaking as Labour confirmed staying in the EU was still on the table. But Mr Leonard struggled to name the 6 tests the party had set for a Brexit negotiation. From Liverpool, here's our political correspondent, Nick Eardley.
I demand a vote on the final Brexit deal.
Like everywhere else in politics,
how we leave the EU, perhaps if, is the big issue here. Labour is increasingly unlikely to back any government deal. It wants a general election, but...
It's right that Parliament has the first say, but if we need to break the impasse, our options must include campaigning for a public vote, and nobody is ruling out Remain as an option.
Some think revisiting the question would be a betrayal, but this conference is also about political calculations.
Hello, how are you?
The party's leader in Scotland was making calculations of his own today, pledging over £1 million to open a credit union account for every S1 in Scotland. But he was talking about Brexit too.
Keir Starmer laid out 6 tests right at the very start of this process.
What are the 6 tests?
Well, the 6 tests are about having a decent alignment and cooperation with the European Union and the single market. It's about protecting the national and regional interests of the UK. It's about how can we forge a positive relationship in the future with the European Union. And I think the signals coming back from Theresa May and the Tory party are all
Richard, I'm going to
about...
have to very quickly stop you there. That's not the 6 tests. There are 6 specific tests. Do you know what they are?
Yeah, well, the 6 tests are around alignment with the single market. It's about putting workers and environmental rights and protecting those. It's about protecting the position of Scotland and other national and regional interests in the UK. And it's about how we're aligned with the single market, so that there is a clear set of criteria that the Labour Party is applying.
That was 3. The party has another 3. But if they're not met, if a government plan was defeated, it's possible, just possible, there could be another referendum.
If there is a future question about whether the UK should be in the European Union or not, yeah, I would probably campaign to remain. But in the context of where we are now, with a decision just being taken 2 years ago, I don't think it's right that I should seek to overturn or block the will of the people.
Labour is keeping its options open for now, but soon decisions will be made and they will have a big impact on what Brexit might look like. Nick Eardley reporting Scotland at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool.
Well, let's go back to Liverpool now, and we're joined by our political correspondent David Porter. David, we heard from Richard Leonard there. He was also asked about the party's decision to stop paying the legal fees of his predecessor, Kezia Dugdale, in a defamation case.
Yeah, if we just recap for a moment, last week Labour announced that in future it would no longer be paying or underwriting those legal costs for Kezia Dugdale in her court action. That was, as you would understand, pretty controversial at the time. Today, Richard Leonard has reaffirmed that in his view, Labour should and will not continue funding the legal case. But it has emerged within the last hour or so that Labour's ruling National Executive Committee will actually now consider the case. It doesn't mean that they are going to change their mind that Kezia Dugdale will get her legal fees underwritten by the Labour Party, but it does mean at the moment that this story is not over.
And a big day tomorrow, Jeremy Corbyn's keynote speech.
Yes, Jeremy Corbyn will be speaking to the conference here, and like any leader, it will be a mixture of speaking to those in the hall and the wider electorate. After a summer which has been dominated by anti-Semitism and Brexit rows, he will be very keen to get on the front foot and try and portray himself as a Prime Minister in waiting. He will acknowledge that if he is going to get into Downing Street, that he will need the support of Scotland. At the moment, there are just 7 Scottish Labour MPs. Before the 2015 general election, there were 41. Jeremy Corbyn knows and will say that if he is to get into Downing Street, Scottish Labour are going to have to return a lot more MPs at the next general election, whenever that comes.
David Porter, thank you. Life expectancy in Scotland has fallen for the first time since records began. The latest data from the National Records of Scotland show it's slipped back and that Scots can expect the shortest lives of all UK countries. Our social affairs correspondent, Reval Alderson, has been looking at the figures. Reval.
Jackie, these data show how long children born in Scotland in the past 2 years can expect to live. Until recently, life expectancy here had increased year on year. In the 1860s, for example, men could expect to live only to 40 and women to 44. By 1982, the year current records began, men could expect to live to almost 70, while women were forging ahead to over 75. And by 2014, that had risen to 77.1 years for men and 81.1 years for women. But the rate of improvement had been slowing, and figures for the next 2 years showed no change. Now it's gone into reverse for the first time since modern records began, although just slightly. Statisticians say although it's a very small drop of a few weeks' life expectancy, it does cement a trend. And there are some suggestions as to why it's happening.
Well, life expectancy is based on mortality, number of deaths, and there has been an increase in the number of deaths of those with Alzheimer's and dementia, and amongst deaths with younger people with drug-related deaths, for example.
Across the UK and indeed many European countries, increases in life expectancy have stalled. They've gone down in Wales too. But Scotland remains at the bottom of the pile. English children born in the last 2 years can expect to live at least 2 years longer than those born in Scotland. So what's the reason? National records say factors such as severe winters and flu epidemics are wiping out the undoubted benefits of better healthcare and public health campaigns, which have cut smoking and drinking rates. And some observers have suggested that public austerity is hitting the care that old people receive. But there's some good news as well. There are now 900 centenarians in Scotland, people aged over 100. And there are 40,000 people in their 90s. And that's a rise of 40% in 10 years, Jackie.
Thank you very much, Rio. Police in Thailand investigating the disappearance of a wealthy Edinburgh man and his Thai wife say their bodies have been discovered buried in the grounds of their property. Alan Hogg and his wife, Not Sudeen, who had a villa in Northern Thailand, were last seen nearly a week ago. 2 men have been arrested and charged with murder. Miss Sudeen's brother has been charged with conspiring to murder and theft. Police received more than 400 reports of revenge porn in the year since a new law was introduced in Scotland. Official figures show the offence of disclosing or threatening to disclose an intimate image were among a rise of 13% in recorded sexual crimes. Overall, crime levels have risen slightly. A coalition of charities is claiming that hundreds of autistic children have been unlawfully excluded from school in Scotland in the last 2 years. The organisations say it's happening in both mainstream and specialist education. The Scottish Government has promised to step up its efforts to help children with the condition. David Cowan has more.
This one is just the main hall, and it's called the Hogwarts Great Hall.
So it's Harry Potter in there somewhere. At home in West Lothian, a young boy shows off his pride and joy.
This is like a miniature potions classroom, I guess.
His mum says we're seeing Callum at his very best, happy, relaxed, stress-free. But last year, life was very different. The 12-year-old has Asperger's syndrome and was attending an autism unit at a primary school.
The roof's come off.
Things started to go badly wrong, leading eventually to an incident where Callum struck a support worker and was excluded.
It was a bit scary because I thought I might not, see some of my friends again if I did get excluded.
Callum's parents believed the unit had failed to act on warning signs. His exclusion was overturned on appeal.
It was very worrying. We kind of thought, well, this is a specialist unit. If Callum can't settle here and isn't happy here, where will he go?
Tough.
Very tough. Very, very tough.
3 charities, Children in Scotland, Scottish Autism and the National Autistic Society Scotland, have found that many parents and children are finding life tough.
Callum's story is by no means unique. Of the 1,400 parents who responded to this survey, 13% said their child had been excluded from school, and more than a third said their child had been excluded informally, which is against the law.
Exclusion can have a devastating impact on the child and the family. And I think our view is that no child or even member of staff should be afraid or distressed in school. And with the right environment, support and approach, exclusion can often be avoided.
And you've got the Mirror of Erised. It shows you what you most desire.
Scotland's largest teaching union, the EIS, says what it most desires is far greater investment in education. The Scottish Government says spending has gone up and it's working with councils to improve support for children like Callum.
Young people with autism are more likely to be excluded from our education system, And that suggests to me that we have to intensify our focus on getting it right for every child, of making sure that we have the correct educational provision in place to meet the needs of every child so they can be well supported in their education.
There is no magic wand, but the charities say school can be made easier for every autistic child. David Cowan reporting Scotland.
It's almost 7:15, a reminder of tonight's main story. A teenager who broke her neck in 2 places after she was knocked down in a hit and run feared she could be paralysed. And still to come, why a pioneer of women's tennis says there's still work to do to ensure gender equality in the game.
Well.
Senior figures in Scotland's tourism industry have warned of a potentially devastating impact on the sector as the UK government overhauls the immigration system. After Brexit, ministers want to treat migrants from the EU the same as those from the rest of the world. But there are fears that a bar on some migrants could hit business, as our political correspondent Andrew Kerr explains.
Hello, welcome to the Brunsfield Hotel, and how may I help you?
Hotel bosses say they're not being helped by the UK government's sweeping overhaul of immigration. It's emerged that after Brexit, senior ministers want to see a skills-based system, with migrants from the EU treated the same as those from the rest of the world. The concern is that could deprive businesses, such as hotels, of a stream of European workers.
It's much easier for a national from an EU country to come to Britain and to come to Scotland and inquire about employment, secure employment and work here. It's a very accessible country with lots of low-cost airlines, making it easy for people from the EU to come.
As Britain checks out from the European Union, there's a lot to contemplate. Some ministers have argued for a more gradual approach. They're worried about a sudden change. Speaking tonight, the Prime Minister insisted future immigration rules must bring down net migration. The Conservatives dismissed suggestions this will harm the economy.
The point of Brexit is to enable us to take control over certain key issues. Customs policy, international trade policy and immigration would be 3 examples, so that we can ensure that those policies are more closely tailored to the specific needs of the United Kingdom and aren't done for us by Brussels.
Scottish ministers say all of this means UK ministers are out of touch as they call once again for Scotland to have more control of migration.
2/3 of Scots believe that the Scottish Government should have control of policy for migration within the UK immigration system, and that's something we will continue to talk to the UK Government about. It's what Scotland needs.
The Prime Minister said to be firming up her migration plans, and they could be announced at the Tory conference next week, with more detail at the end of the year. But the government's opponents insist a mess is still being made of Brexit, and it's time to clean it up. Andrew Kerr, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
An independent safety inspection of a new school in Dumfries has revealed 1,200 issues with fixtures and fittings. The North West Community Campus, which cost £28 million, was closed just over a fortnight ago following a series of incidents in which 2 children and 1 staff member were hurt. It's still unclear how long the school will remain shut. Can football tackle mental health issues and help cut the suicide rate? Well, a number of top-flight clubs had to join forces with the Scottish Government to develop a new approach to mental health. Our senior football reporter, Chris McLaughlin, has been talking to one man who believes he wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our national game.
Hi, I'm Paul McNeill, and football saved my life.
Paul works as a youth development officer at the Scottish FA. Bullied at school, his father took his own life when he was 22.
Maybe the most devastating moment in my life. I didn't know what to do, but I was lucky that all these friends and people that I'd met in football stretched out to me. I'm dyslexic and I learn a little bit differently. A teacher told me that I was a problem child. I was bullied and teased, but lucky enough for me, it was 1982 and it was a World Cup in Spain, and I always remember it so well that there was this kind of magical moment in my life where I found football.
And it's football the government hopes can help others. This is why 77% of suicides in Scotland last year were male. The most at risk category is men aged between 45 and 54.
it just became a safety zone for me. These kind of white lines of safety, I would cross over them and I would just have so much fun, and all the teasing and bullying and everything else could just go away. In 1987, I'm a Paisley boy and I'm a big St Mirren fan, and my dad took me to the 87 Cup final. And when St Mirren won, he lifted me above his head and said, "We did it, me man." And it was the most magical moment in my whole life.
After his father's death, Paul struggled but turned to football. He now helps youngsters who were like him through coaching. It saved him, and he's determined to save others.
And do you know something? Kenny Dalglish can maybe go over 100 caps, but I could maybe do something as powerful as that. I'm never going to be the best football player in the world, but it's a dream come true to sit in this stadium and work.
And if you've been affected by any of the issues raised in that report, you can contact the BBC's Action Line for advice and help. Now, she's widely considered one of the pioneers of international women's tennis. Now, 50 years since she appeared in the Wimbledon final against Billie Jean King, Judy Dalton says the women's game still isn't equal to the men's. Heather Dewar reports.
An era when tennis for women was a very different ballgame.
For the first time, Wimbledon met Little Miss Chubby Legs with the owl-like glasses.
In monetary terms, the gap was huge. Players like Billie Jean King, the darlings of the day, fighting to prove her worth in the match now dubbed the Battle of the Sexes.
What makes you think that I won't be able to psych you out of the match just like I did Margaret?
It did little, though, for the women who played the sport. The gap in pace darker than ever. That gap leading to the formation of the original 9 in the early 70s, who paved the way for the Women's Tennis Association.
It started because of inequality, because of the tournament in Los Angeles, where you had, say, 3 of the top 20 men who were receiving $8,000, and we had 5 of the top 10 women who were going to play, and we were receiving like $750 or something.
Tennis has come a long way since then, but issues over equality and even sexism in the sport remain. This moment at the US Open final stirring the debate.
Stole a point from me. You're a thief too. For me to say thief and for him to take a game, it made me feel like it was a sexist remark.
When it comes to equality, women at the top of their game here in Scotland think more needs to be done, and the tennis authorities need to take more interest in the women's game.
When you bring women together who have a common passion or a common cause, you bring them together, they'll network, they'll share, you won't find the egos, and together they can make a huge impact. If you're operating as a lone wolf, you can have a limited impact, but you create your army just the same way that Billie Jean did with her original 9 gang. There's your security and your numbers, there's your foot soldiers, but every foot soldier needs a leader.
And she's adamant that a joint union for both men and women can actually help that. Heather Dewar, reporting Scotland.
A revised plan for a multi-million-pound revamp of the Scottish National Gallery has finally been announced. It'll create a number of new galleries in Edinburgh's city centre space and give more prominence to Scottish art. Our arts correspondent, Pauline McLean, can bring us up to date.
Visitor numbers have almost doubled at the Scottish National Gallery in the last decade. But few of the visitors see the whole collection, spread as it is across several levels and buildings. Aside from the iconic Monarch of the Glen, most Scottish art is in a basement gallery, and many visitors don't get that far.
We introduced a camera to count the number of people coming down there, the sort of cameras we have on the outside of the building to see how many people come in. And we had the camera there for a year and a half, and it showed that 1 in 6 people, 18% of people actually made it down to this part of the gallery. A lot of people either didn't know what the space was, or found perhaps because of the design of the stairwell that it was the entrance to come to the cafe or even to the toilets. It didn't look like the rest of the gallery.
Those former basement galleries, unchanged since the 1970s,
we're connecting in with the existing structure,
are central to the project, which will create more space and make the galleries more accessible. The £22 million cost will be met by the lottery, the government and private fundraising, and replaces the previous plan to extend out into Princes Street Gardens.
It was becoming clear with the first scheme that the engineering challenges in extending out to those 5 metres above the railway line, everything that involved in terms of engineering expense, it was reaching a point where it simply wasn't good value for the investment. So we took the difficult decision to pause, to recast the scheme. And I think what we have now is actually a stronger concept.
Work, which will begin in the next few weeks, is expected to be completed in early 2021. And although some areas, like the historic Playfair Steps, will be closed to the public, the National Galleries will be open throughout. Polly McLean reporting, Scotland, Edinburgh.
Well, looks like quite a benign day in Edinburgh there. Is it all going to continue? Christopher, give us the weather.
Pretty windy, actually. Thanks very much indeed, Jackie. Yes, hello there. It was a windy day for many and a windy night to come too. But cracking photo from one of our weather watchers there on Lewis with the waves crashing over. Now, for the rest of this week, high pressure is nearby, but we're to the northern side of it, so that means weather front's never far away, some cloud and some high winds at times too. And then by the end of the week, weather front slips southwards, introducing a cold northwesterly. But back to the here and now, and it's a cloudy evening, a windy evening, some outbreaks of rain through the early hours, persistent at times, but it is fairly mild. Temperatures overnight 11 to 13 Celsius, not far off where they were during the day today. Tomorrow, it starts cloudy, it starts wet in places, but come mid to late morning, a lot of that rain tends to peter out, turning much lighter, fairly patchy. Remains quite cloudy, remains quite windy, but there'll be some breaks in the cloud to reveal some sunshine, certainly through parts of South Ayrshire in towards Dumfries and Galloway and eastern Scotland in general. And temperature-wise, 17, 18 degrees, but give some sunshine in towards the northeast. We could well see 21 degrees. Now, in the northwest, it's cooler, fairly cloudy, still quite breezy and wet at times, but come further north still and up towards Shetland, some sunshine for you, but not quite as warm as elsewhere. Rest of the afternoon into the evening, little change, fairly cloudy, fairly breezy. And then Thursday, that's the next significant change. This weather front moving southwards, bringing some wet weather, but as it clears south, introducing cold northwesterly winds, as depicted on the chart there by those blue colours. So here's Thursday. It's a cloudy start, a wet start in the north, and then the rain moves southwards through the course of the day and tends to peter out once again, brightening up behind it, but cooling down. Temperatures around 10 to 15 Celsius with a few showers. And then for the end of the week, high pressure is still with us, at least nearby. There it is, you can just about make it out. But there is a lot of cloud coming around that circulation. So whilst it will be largely dry through Friday and the weekend, it will also be largely cloudy. That's the forecast.
Thank you very much, Christopher. And that's Reporting Scotland. We're back at 10:30. Until then, from all the team, good evening.